Okay, we're on to video 8, and we left off with more paradoxes, and I'll continue on reading from the book here. Heraclitus had a view that the world was in eternal flux as its ultimate nature. This seems consistent with the notion that the world is simultaneously there and not there at the same time. You can't quite get your finger on reality at its most fundamental core before it seems to wither away into nothingness again. The change and flux is so pervasive that it creates a haze of ghostliness to the finite mind at its most fundamental level. We perceive an approximation of reality from a macro view. Heraclitus' view is supported by the fact that the atomic particles are engaged in an eternal spin. This spin takes place billions of times per microsecond. This adds to the illusion of what it is that we are observing at the most fundamental level. As was identified with photons traveling at the speed of light in incremental units of h, electrons spin in discrete units as well. It is not continuous, and it cannot spin at increments at any rate in between. The spin goes from 1/2 to 1 in what appears to be in no time at all. Again, it is this incremental discreteness that aids in our view of reality. We for some reason perceive only the discrete units of reality, but nothing of the infiniteness in between each of these units. The incremental unit that being lands on is not an exact location due to the nature of perpetual spin. Matter could never be completely still at one exact location. It only exists in an averaged out sense of existing within a series of space-time locations. Just like Euclid's point, it creates the reality of a line out of nothing. The actual line is made of other lines, just like movement is made out of other movement. But at its most fundamental level, it never exists in one single unit of space-time motion. It is not a something that is in motion. It does not take a discrete stationary unit of being and start whirling it around into the perceived world. It is a nothing that is in motion that creates a series of something onto a series of locations we call space-time reality. Space-time mass motion creates a limit. Einstein came up with space-time. I added 2 other items, um, mass and motion, because they're all extension. I just added it to this sentence. Creates a limit which we can understand. It quantizes the world so that we can understand it in a limited way. The quantity of length, width, height, and time and mass can be altered by motion. Light is the speed limit of the universe, yet at its core it's really not moving at all. If you could travel at the speed of light, you would find that time stands still. Acceleration cannot be measured in an absolute sense. It can only be measured relative to something else. This is proof again that space-time mass motion is relative and not absolute. Therefore, it falls short of absolute being, which is the ultimate goal of existence. Absolute being is infinite, eternal, and immutable, not relative to anything else. Finally, anything that falls short of absolute being is not worth considering as ultimate reality, but only as illusion. Motion is very important to the way we view the world. It is so powerful that it can alter time, alter mass, alter extension, and most importantly, create matter. It is the source of change. It is always relative to something else, however, and therefore not absolute. If there was only one thing in the world, it would not experience change, time, and extension. From God's perspective, obviously, there is only one macro reality. Therefore, all experience, change, time, and extension must be some sort of illusion from its ultimate, true, absolute nature. The only thing that motion cannot alter is the speed of light. It is absolute. It is a constant regardless of your motion relative to it, except for one big exception. If you could travel at the speed of light, you would find that time would stand still. You had no extension, your mass would be infinite, and most importantly, you would have no speed or motion. You would be infinitely there and not there at the same time. You would be both nothing and infinite at the same time, at the same non-time, to be more precise. It is like a huge yo-yo balloon where existence and non-existence expand and contract relative to something else, yet it by itself does not change at all. Change is the source of a great paradox. It would appear that the world must be deterministic on the one hand, since everything seems to happen as a result of something else. Yet on the other level, quantum mechanics dictates that some things just happen out of mere chance, for no reason at all. There is no source or first cause of events. Whether you believe the world to be deterministic or free, the first ultimate source is still nothing at all. It is the paradox of space, time, mass, motion, units that give us a clue to the true nature of being. The most fundamental unit of space is a dimensionless point. As Euclid stated, lines are not made up of points, but of other lines. The most fundamental unit of time is the eternal now. Perceived time is not made up of nows, but of durations of moments. Mass is not made up of one atomic unit of weight, but is conceived through its relevance to the gravitational pull of other matter. And the most fundamental unit of motion is a stationary unit like Zeno's arrow. Motion is not made up of a single independent movement, but of a series of changes viewed in relation to each other. All of this again emphasizes the relative nature of extension, which falls short of absolute being. It is the human mind which creates the quantities that are relative to each other, whereas pure being is not relative to anything. Nothing is the only thing which is absolute, since it doesn't need anything else for its existence. It is not something relative to something else. Isn't nothing relative to something? Yes. Then doesn't nothing also need something else to be identified as nothing? No, because nothing is still nothing, whether there is something else or nothing else, whereas something is always relative to something else, whether there can be nothing or something. Even if you said that there was only one something and no nothing, something would still be relative to itself, for it would have a beginning and an end. Therefore, again, nothing is the only thing that is not relative to anything else, or itself, and is finally the ultimate, most fundamental unit of nature. Proof that time doesn't exist at a fundamental level. The past does not exist any longer, the future doesn't exist yet, and the present moment is a timeless now that separates the past and the future. It is the nothing in between the two. And this is kind of interesting if you draw it on a board. If you have the past here, and you have the future out here, and you have now here, we know that the past doesn't exist any longer, the future doesn't exist yet, and where is that now, this dimensionless point that we live in here? As Euclid stated, it has no extension. Planck in our world claims that that is a Planck unit there, that there is a smallest unit here. So this is, metaphysically speaking, Zeno and other metaphysicians would say that there is no now in where you're experiencing that. It's timeless, And Planck would state that that is a discrete unit in there. We experience time at the very end of the past and at the very beginning of the future simultaneously. Now that's interesting. So there's a point, the past, so there's nothing there or something there, a point that separates the past and a point there that separates the future. And we said before that those points were dimensionless. It's like Euclid's point at the end of a line. It is nothing and infinite all at the same time. It is nothing since the end of a line is a dimensionless point. It is infinite since the end of the line never ends doing an infinite regress. Now is an eternally fleeting moment where infinity merges with nothing. I'll stop there and we'll get into the next video.